Welcome to the committee's 9th meeting in 2020. Could I remind everyone, please, to ensure that their mobile phones are on silent. I'd like to welcome Stuart McMillan and Dean Lockhart, who are attending the committee meeting for Agenda Item 1. Agenda Item 1 is an inquiry into the construction and procurement of ferry vessels in Scotland. Are there any members that wish to declare any interest at this stage? Stuart, do you have any interest to declare regarding ferries?
No, just what I said last week. My wife works for CalMac, but
thank you. That's fine. We'll take further evidence on our inquiry today from the representative of Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited, CMAL. And I'd like to welcome to the panel Kevin Hobbs, the Chief Executive Officer, and Jim Anderson, the Director of Vessels, both from CMAL. There are a series of questions, gentlemen, and what I'd ask is that you do occasionally watch me if you're giving a long answer, because I may wish to encourage you to come to a close to allow all the questions, and there are a considerable amount to be asked. The first questions this morning will come from John Finney. John.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel, and thanks for your written evidence.
I'm sorry, this is the second time I've done it. It must be a stage of getting old. We did agree. Stuart, you wanted to ask a question just about experience. So I'm sorry, John, for interrupting, and I'm sorry, Stuart, for forgetting you.
I'm obliged, Convener. I was confident you'd bring me in at some point. I'm just looking for quite a brief answer from the two gentlemen at the end of the table about their personal professional experience in building vessels of the type that is under consideration, and indeed more generally in the shipbuilding industry.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Hobbs, Chief Executive Officer of Caledonian Maritime Assets. I've been involved in the shipping industry in one form or another for over 30 years. I have generally been involved in ferries, construction of, running ferry companies. I've also had responsibility for building and running chemical and product tankers, and also project cargo ships, so considerable experience. Also as port director in Milford Haven, which is the biggest energy port in the UK, so very relevant experience. I think it's also worth saying that, you know, there seems to have been some misunderstandings by some people that have been here in relation to us as an organisation. We're a public body. We are not civil servants. We basically come from the private sector, and we have relevant experience. So the team comprises of civil engineers, naval architects, etc. So
test much of this later.
Okay.
I really just want personal testimony.
If I can just quickly introduce myself, yes. I'm Jim Anderson, Director of Vessels at CMAL. I've been in shipbuilding and ship design since 1981. This is all I've done. I know a lot of other things, but this is what I know mostly. I would say this is more than my work. It's probably my life. Just very quickly, I'm a chartered engineer. I'm a fellow of the Royal Institute of Naval Architects. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Marine Engineers and Scientists. So I'm pretty well versed in ship design, shipbuilding, ship commissioning, and everything it takes. I've been involved in the design of several CalMac ferries and lots of other types of vessels throughout my life.
Thank you. Now, John, your moment of glory is back in. John.
Thank you, Convener. Morning again, panel. I think I got as far as thanking you for your written evidence. And maybe if I can quote a bit from that, please. And I'm quoting here, "Dozens of vessels of this kind have been built successfully by other shipyards across Europe. Can you tell us where these vessels were built, how much they cost, and how long it took to build them, please?"
I'll hand that one over to Jim.
Dozens there's actually been hundreds. The supplier of the equipment on 801 and 802 is a company called Wärtsilä, and they've supplied dual fuel engines to over 500 vessels, or round about 500 vessels throughout the world, you know, everywhere, you know, Japan, Scandinavia, Germany, America, Canada, BC Ferries. And I think the last numbers that we had for the number of engines that they've delivered dual fuel, it's something like 2,500 engines that they've delivered. Sorry, the other questions were?
cost and the time taken to build, Mr Anderson?
The costs for this
appreciate
type of
that will
vessel
vary.
and this size of vessel, you know, a large CalMac ferry, it's in the range of our contract cost at Ferguson. So this is the norm. This contract cost that we've got is the normal price for these type of vessels. And the duration of building these ships, 24 to 27 months in that kind of that region, and that was typical of what Ferguson's of old could actually deliver. You know, a standard large CalMac ferry. But if you don't mind me saying, there's been a lot made of this innovation and novel concepts and LNG, and it's all new. This is standard engineering. You know, it really is standard engineering. Yes, it is something new, but for the shipyard, it's engines, it's pipes, it's ventilation, it's cables, and it's a large tank. And it's simplified for them. It's not any different from any other system you would have on a ship. That tank at this stage, all right, there's some safety studies that have to be carried out and these kind of things, but the LNG fundamentally is straightforward. The engines run on one fuel, which is diesel. Sorry?
To interrupt you, I think colleagues will maybe talk more about the technicalities.
Yes.
It's just some general background here, if you don't mind. If that's not picked up later, then I'm sure you'll get the opportunity to. I wonder, did you speak to the owners or the builders of these vessels when developing the concept?
Yes, we spoke to several owners all over. We spoke to owners. We visited several ships, both the ships, the bunkering, the facilities. Spoke to the owners, the operators. We spoke to shipyards. Kevin and myself, we are members of Interferry, and we're also members of ShipPACs, which are worldwide international, you know, forums for ship operators and ship owners. So we are regular attenders at these conferences. Not only are we regular attenders, we make big contributions to these conferences. So that's we make presentations also. So that's a big place for us to find out what the market's doing, speak to suppliers, So yes, we do a lot of research in any project before we embark on it, lots and lots of research.
So for the avoidance of doubt, that's both the owners of the vessels and those who build the vessels?
The owners, the operators, those who build the vessels, and also those who supply the equipment.
So what sort of locations, Mr Anderson?
Sorry?
What sort of locations
Do they build these ships in?
that you visited?
We've been to Norway, we've been to Germany, we've been to Sweden. Generally, the Scandinavian countries we've been to, close to hand. We haven't been as far as the BC Ferries in British Columbia.
Before you go on with the next question, sorry, can I pick up on one point that was made there, if I may? You said that normally the average building time is 24 months.
24 to 27. It's typical for a ferry of this size, yes.
Okay, so Ferguson came in with a 1-month build duration, and I think your comment was that you granted them a significant indulgence for allowing them to have 31 months. Why, if you knew that it was going to take longer than anyone else to build that, did you think that they were the best value for building the ferries?
There's lots of things that you take into consideration when you're evaluating. So there's delivery that we look at. We look at obviously the contract cost. We look at what the likely project costs are. You know, if we receive bids from, you receive them from all over the world. There's so many companies out there.
But I understand that, but what you're saying to me is that this was significantly longer than anyone else. You've got island communities crying out for ferries. You've got the Scottish Government asking for a ferry, and you are granting, by your own words, a significant indulgence by allowing an increased time frame.
I'm saying typically 24 to 27 months at the time, and I would have to check what the other bidders were offering in the way of timescales, because it all depends on the market at the time that we go out and ask for ships. You know, it depends how busy shipyards are. But typically it would be around 27 months. So Ferguson's, their bid came in at 31 months. That's what we evaluated them on, and we evaluated them on price and delivery.
So your comment, I'm just harking it for the third time, significant indulgence was perhaps a slip of the pen. Sorry, John, I interrupted. I apologise.
No, you're grand. Thank you, Kevin. So, Mr Anderson, I asked about owners and builders, and you included operators in that, so that seems to be a significant level of engagement in advance. Can you outline how, excuse me, Can you outline how CMAL incorporated the views of island communities and ferry users into the specification of the new vessels, please?
Yes, what we do with all the projects that we're involved in, pre-contract, we will go and meet with the communities, and Kevin can come in on this as well. We met with the Arran community, we met with all the communities for the Skye Triangle. So it's a big part of what we do before we commence on any project, where we have question and answer sessions, we have public engagement, and that really helps us inform what this type of vessel will be, not with regard to the fuel, but with regard to the requirements, the passenger numbers, the cars, the HGVs, the facilities. So there's a huge amount of engagement, and I feel we actually do very, very well with it. You want to say anything on that, Kevin?
I wonder then, perhaps doing that, you're perhaps aware of the Audit Scotland report for a couple of years back. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term co-creative process that's is increasingly being used. There's certainly a view that there was considerably more engagement from Audit Scotland with regard to this than there was from yourself. Can you comment on that?
Audit Scotland, not from my side, no, not from my side.
No, the way that they engaged with the island communities compared to the way that CMAL engaged with the island communities.
I really can't comment on that. I can talk about how we engage with the island.
Well, can I put it another way then? Are you able to say, when you go and engage with the island communities, are you going to say, what do you want, or are you saying, this is what we have, what do you think of it?
No, this is two-way. This is absolutely two-way, and I can give another really good example of that for the project we've got for the New Isla ferry and the New Jura ferry. We've actually got another engagement in 2 weeks' time from now, and this is a question, and so we go and listen, but we can't provide everything. We listen, we take the questions, we give the answers, and I think by and large, when we look at the Skye Triangle ferry, I think the communities are getting the ship that they want. This ship is, it's like the Hebrides, and we know they're very, very happy with the Hebrides. This ship is Hebrides, and I would say Hebrides plus when it's finished.
Are you able to say anything that changed as a result of your engagement with the island communities? So you had something, they suggested something else, and that was incorporated.
One of the big things that the island communities look for in the ferry users is reliability. So we look at that from a point of view of station keeping, for manoeuvring, and that was a big part of our outline specification to all the shipyards, that these vessels would be highly manoeuvrable, reliable. So we look at lots of redundancy of equipment in the ships. So it's a bit like the Loch Seaforth, whereby the Seaforth has lots of redundancy. So if we do have a failure, the ship can still operate. So these kind of things we incorporate into our requirements.
And colleagues have a number of other questions, Mr Anderson. Can I ask you about something that surprised me in the submission that you sent to the committee? And this was in the executive summary, where you said the choice of fuel, passenger and cargo capacities, extent of onboard facilities and outfitting are questions of policy. CMAL is not a policy maker. So what was the point of all that engagement if CMAL isn't a policy maker?
Do you want to come on that, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we're not the policy maker, but we have a tripartite arrangement where every month we meet with both CalMac and Transport Scotland. So the policy maker is Transport Scotland. So there is a huge amount of engagement between the three parties.
Well, at the risk of flogging it, as an elected representative of the majority of these island communities, you feel they're getting what they want in relation to the vessels?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Peter, you wanted to come in briefly before we move on to Emma.
I want to explore a wee bit more about you say you consult widely with the island communities. The messages we're getting from the island communities is that, yes, you consult and then you ignore what they say. Because on many occasions, the island communities have said, rather than one big ship, they would like two smaller ships, which would be less expensive, less complex. They would be more reliable. You speak about reliability. 2 ships obviously going to be more reliable than 1, because if 1 goes down, you've still got something there. And they would be easier to dock in high wind conditions rather than a big ship like this. So, you know, I feel that you're not listening to the island communities, and you have failed the island communities. And if this is going to be your new standard design going forward, I think you've got it terribly wrong, because they're too expensive, they're too complex. They don't deliver that reliability. And what you are being accused of is you're building cruise liners where you should be building something more akin to a bus, because that's what the service is, and that's what's required.
Mr. Chapman, I'm going to push you to come to a question.
So the question is, do you agree with that the islanders' summation of what you're delivering for them?
I can certainly speak about the Hebrides, because it was a ship that I was deeply involved with, the Hebrides. And we know that the islanders, and I think you'll know this as well, they're very, very happy with the Hebrides. The Hebrides is one of the most reliable ships that we have in the fleet, the size, everything. I don't think anyone's got a bad word to say about that ship. The new ship, aside from the dual fuel aspects, it's the Hebrides. It really is the Hebrides. More passenger numbers, but that's a requirement of the resilience. But this ship that's been designed is Hebrides Plus. There is no doubt about it. It will be enhanced for manoeuvring, for noise, for emissions, all these kind of things. It is the ship that they want. And I did hear that in evidence whereby the good folk in the islands are really, really happy with the Hebrides. And this is what we're delivering. We are delivering the ship that is required. So,
well, I mean, would you disagree with the fact that a big ship, a tall ship, is more difficult to manoeuvre in high wind situations? Because your reliability in high wind situations is becoming poorer as time goes on. So what's the reason for that?
there could be cases for small ships in certain places, in smaller ships, but everything is subject to, obviously, the cost. Two smaller ships, how much smaller would we make them? You wouldn't want to make them half the size, because then in the poor weather, these ships wouldn't be sailing. And the sea keeping of smaller vessels going across the Minch, it would not be suitable. Two smaller vessels would still need two crews, and also smaller vessels are not as fuel efficient as a larger vessel. It's just a fact of physics. Whereby the work that we're doing on the new Isla vessel, we're already demonstrating that actually having a slightly longer vessel, we can see an extra 5 metres on a vessel of these sizes would give you something like 14% reduction in your fuel. And it's massive, so not just from a point of view from climate change, but from operational costs, for fuel costs. It's huge, and it can run into millions of pounds, millions and millions of pounds. So there's lots that have to be considered when you compare one vessel against two vessels. There really is.
Okay. Emma Harper, you've got the next question. Emma.
Yep, thank you, Convener. Good morning. I'm interested in the issues around the bids for the new vessels were assessed 50% on price and 50% on quality. And I'm wondering if you can explain a wee bit about how the cost and quality scores for the bids were calculated. In your submission, it says here that basically the quality scoring of the tenders was concerned with each bidder's build strategy, team composition and methods, rather than their offering competing designs. So, what cost and quality scores were given to each of the bids?
Well, the actual scores, I would have to actually look back at what the scores were. But certainly when we carry out the evaluation from a quality point of view, we look at the shipyard capability, we look at the shipyard capacity, we look at the subcontractors and the suppliers and the specialists that they would intend to use in the ship. We look at what they say is their concept. When we go out to the market with our outline specification and our requirements, that's when we've done a feasibility. So what we ask the shipyards to do is provide their concept. So we will then evaluate their concept, we'll evaluate their technical specification. And that technical specification is a fully detailed piece of work. And as we say in our job, it even goes down to the level of, have you got a 4-slice toaster? I mean, that's the level of a specification that we get. So we evaluate that. I've actually brought along with us today it lets you see this is what was provided by Ferguson's as part of their quality offer. It's 2,000 pages. You know, it really is. It's a substantial and it's a compelling offer proposal. In fact, we as an organisation, and me in my lifetime, I've never seen anything at this kind of level of detail for a bid. So it was well put together. So we consider these aspects of quality. We do look at the delivery schedules as well. Anything else on the quality? But when it comes to the cost, we look at not only the cost, the price that's been offered by the yard, but depending on where the ship would be, whatever location it might be in the world, you know, we put a site team in place at whatever the shipyard might be. You know, as probably everyone round at the table knows, we've built recently in Flensburg Yard in Germany by the Loch Seaforth and the Finlagan in Remontova. So there's significant costs for us and for CalMac, for us putting our site team there, for the CalMac crew, once you start to get near that point of view of the ship starting to come alive. We also have all the costs of bringing a vessel home, you know, and depending on where that is, just the crewing costs, the fuel costs, the storing, everything. So these are all factored in with the quality, and it was a 50-50 split. And the way we score it is that the lowest price overall from the project point of view will receive 100% of that 50, and from the quality point of view, the person who scores the highest from the quality gets 100% of that 50, and then everything is obviously a ratio of that. So
I mean, basically the tenders awarded, obviously not just on the bottom line of cost. It is, as you're intimating, that it's a very detailed process of application and quality and assessment in order to award a contract.
Yes. And the other things obviously we'll consider as well, but not in the scoring, but it's something that's part of the evaluation, is when we go out to the market and we receive, you know, these 6 or different concepts, they'll all be slightly different in the way of, you know, the speed and powering, and that's really, really important for, you know, how much power this ship will need to actually, you know, make the timetable at 16.5 knots. And every kilowatt is pounds. So these things, we look at the overall, not as part of the evaluation, but it's something that's we consider the operational cost. How much will this concept cost us, not just to buy it, but to run this vessel in the future? And it's really, really important.
Thanks.
And just before we move on, if the cheapest gets 100% of the 50% thing, the most expensive presumably gets 0 of the 50%.
There's a weighting, so that there's a ratio, so we can provide you with the actual, you know, the actual numbers again.
So it doesn't work like that?
No, it doesn't work like that, no. So say if someone's 97 million and someone's 96, you know, it's whatever that difference is of that 96 and 97, which would be like a point, yes, or 2 points.
I'll definitely take up your offer of the weighting so we can understand that. And perhaps you could explain in the weightings which bidder got what, as far as the weightings are concerned. Sorry, the next question is from Rachel. Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you. Good morning, panel. Beyond the quality scores that you've just been talking about, what weight did you attach to the financial stability and shipbuilding record of the bidders in the scoring process? And indeed, can you provide the committee with those weightings?
Yeah, I think that effectively we have to carry out due diligence on financial stability of each and every yard that bids. It is also fair to say that many shipyards are not as strong anymore as they used to be post the financial crash. So the shipbuilding market has changed significantly over time since 2008, 2009. It is part of our assessment, fairly obviously, if we believe that the shipyard is financially unstable, then we would discount them effectively. However, that wasn't the case for any of the bids that we saw. So that's pretty much what we do.
In September 2015, before the Ferguson won the contract, CMAL chairman warned Transport Scotland that engagement with a newly established shipyard with no track record at all of building ferries of this size is an unsecured risk of about 60 million, which is totally off track of what is normal practice. There is no way the board can recommend the Scottish Government through CMAL take this level of unsecured risk on its shoulders. And how would you comment to that on what you've just said with regard to the scoring process and the financial stability?
So this is quite a complicated matter. Effectively, all of the bidders said that they could provide refund guarantees. I think that letter is being taken in complete and utter isolation, and it shouldn't be taken in isolation, and I'll try to put a bit of colour into that. So at that point in time, when we got to preferred bidder stage, every single bidder had met the criteria with regard to bank guarantees, surety bonds. They're one in the same thing. One's an insurance-backed bond and one is a bank guarantee. So at that point in time, when we started getting into the detailed discussions with the shipyard, Ferguson's basically then said that they couldn't provide 100% guarantees, which, you know, is a big problem. When I say that that letter is taken in isolation, at that particular point in time when that was written, there were still ongoing discussions, but the board at the time felt that they had to raise it as an issue with Transport Scotland. The preferred bidder, which had been announced, as you know, by the First Minister, was beginning to change their tune, if you want to put it that way. So what we actually ended up doing is we negotiated in a different way with the shipyard to get ourselves comfortable as a board and as a management team with their bid. So the discussions revolved around vesting all of the materials and the equipment and all of the machinery. And what vesting means effectively is as the equipment, the machinery and the materials are delivered to the yard, we CMAL actually own them. So if you look at the overall contract price of 97, broadly you can split it into about 2/3 in relation to the parts of the ship and 1/3 for the labour. That's the general split across any shipyard. And by us agreeing during September with the shipyard that we would vest it, that closed the gap significantly in terms of the risk. So the risk which our chairman was flagging up at that particular point in time was that without any other mechanism of owning the equipment, the materials and the machinery, there was a £60 million gap. However, 2/3 of £97 million, broadly 64, as the equipment starts arriving at the yard, we then own it, and effectively that closes the risk gap, and that is where we got to enable the contract to be signed in mid-October.
So you talk about the bank guarantees and the insurance-backed bonds. Do you have details of the other bidders in terms of how they had presented their current financial position? Is that all in writing?
I would have to look back. I wasn't actually employed at the time of this. Jim was. However, in terms of really detailed discussions, that really only takes place with the preferred bidder. So we wouldn't have any view whatsoever on ultimately whether anybody else that said that they could provide surety bonds was able to or not able to actually ultimately provide them.
Comes in. Are you saying that right up until the last minute you don't take in the financial stability of the bidders?
What I'm saying is there is an iterative process from choosing a preferred bidder to actually signing. So the preferred bidder was chosen by us on the 20th of August. There is then lots of discussions that happen to make sure that we can verify everything that they have promised or not promised, as the case may be.
So basically it's a risk?
There is always a risk with any commercial transaction.
Just clarify something. You said the preferred bidder was chosen by you on the 20th of August, but you didn't get the billing schedule till the 28th of August.
That again, that's taken in isolation.
No, that's my question. 12 is mine.
We had...
sorry. I'm getting in trouble with other members of the committee, which, of course, they're at absolute liberty to do. It is, I owe you one, Stuart, but don't ever think of reclaiming it. Sorry, Kevin.
Okay. So as I say, the whole thing is an iterative process, and we choose a preferred bidder. We then have to verify that they can comply with everything that they've promised. What I'm saying with regard to this particular issue of the surety bond or bank guarantees is they actually did a U-turn on that.
Okay. Sorry, Rachel, I interrupted you. I think you have a further question.
Sorry, convener, I don't know if Jim wanted to come in. Did you want to say something before I ask my next question?
I've forgotten what it was again.
Let me move on. So, FEMA had only recently exited receivership when you awarded them the contract for the new vessels. They subsequently experienced cash flow, and that resulted in the Scottish Government providing a £45 million commercial loan. So, do you believe that CMAL's process for assessing financial capability and indeed for the bidders is sufficiently robust?
Yes, is the very short answer. There is a longer answer if you would like one.
Yeah, I'll have the longer answer.
Yeah, okay. So basically, historically, shipbuilding just slices everything up into 20% parts. So contract award through to delivery, 20, 20, 25, lots of 20. We in discussions with the shipyard, came to the conclusion that to smooth that cash flow out would be better for them, and it didn't really make any difference to us. What we were interested in at the end of the day was the final price of the ship. So you have some schedules there which show 15 milestone payments, so we decided to slice it up in a different way to smooth the cash flow, and that was a way of helping the shipyard ultimately. And to be frank, we would have done that with any shipyard, because it doesn't make any difference ultimately as to you know, our final payment price. I think you have the percentages there. We've actually put those in. So, I mean, we weren't concerned, and I think it's also worth saying that when we looked at all of the bids, the compliant bids, all 6 compliant bids, they were broadly within a range. And, you know, would it have rung alarm bells if only one shipyard came in and said that they could build the ship? Yes, absolutely. Would it have come in if one shipyard would have come along and say, well, you know, we're the only one that can build the ship and it's going to cost £200 million? That would have rung alarm bells. But when you have 6 people bidding and they all put in compliant bids, we were absolutely convinced that the shipyard could perform and they could build the ship for that amount of money. Effectively, ultimately, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, there were lots of mistakes made by the shipyard, and they're effectively the masters of their own demise as far as we're concerned, but I'm sure we'll come on to that later on.
I've got one last question. Why did Ferguson's expect 103 million, but before the negotiations are completed, Nicola Sturgeon announced that it was a 96.8 million deal?
The chronology of that is not correct. So we've written to the committee, and I'm sure you've got access to that. We had the final negotiated stamped payment schedule, which you have access to, which came in on the 27th of August, and the First Minister announced it on the 31st of August. You know, obviously you've listened to evidence from other people, and I think quite a lot of that evidence is disingenuous.
Can I just add quickly, going back to bank refund guarantees and how we pay in instalments and we take title, that really does, that protects everything. That really does. OK, this yard has failed. We know it's failed, but this could have been in any other yard in the world. But as we go along, we're taking ownership of, you know, substantial pieces of equipment with high value, plus we have the refund guarantee in place. So we're always very, very carefully managing the financial risk, really carefully. And that's a standard throughout the world in shipbuilding contracts.
Come in.
And I've just checked that we don't otherwise appear to be asking this. The subject of vesting and taking title has come up in the questions we've just been asked. Given that you're essentially paying the yard to buy something which you then own, how does that appear in your balance sheet? In other words, if you're taking ownership early in the process, how have you dealt with that in your balance sheet, both in terms of the vesting process, but also the other methods of transferring ownership?
I think we'll write you on that. I'm not the finance director, but effectively it is treated as work in progress. But there is a fuller answer to that. So I'll ask our financial director.
Well, just to assist you in doing that, I'm looking to the future when ultimately the receivers went in, you know, as to who the ownership of the assets that was sitting on the quay actually lay with. Now, I do understand that in these circumstances, assets that are owned by others that are within the compass of the receivership are not necessarily protected to the owner of the asset. And
No. Well, we have something in place for that. Sorry, I now understand the question. So when all the equipment comes into the store, it's formally signed over to us by both parties. So there's a formal document. We have 3 weekly / 4 weekly meetings with the shipyard on the project, and everything is formally signed over to us as us owning this. There's a formal piece of documentation that actually says this here has been transferred, and every 3 or 4 weeks it's updated as a pump comes in or whatever. So we have that document which actually says we now own this. We're paying for the bricks as it goes along. That's what we're doing, in simple terms.
We also physically stamp it. So if it's a piece of metal or a piece of aluminium, we would spray paint it. But generally, if it's in a box, effectively we got a huge sticker and we put it on it, and it's labelled up. It tells us what it is, what date it was delivered, the fact that it's ours.
This is unusual, convener. I wasn't on the visit to the yard. Did colleagues see that when they were at the yard?
Maybe unlikely, because most of the equipment is protected, so it'll have the covers over it. So, but yes, everything is labelled. Yes,
Absolutely. That's fine.
yes.
Thank you,
And we could send you some photographs. I could get our site team to send some photographs, because that's one of their big jobs in life.
That also extends to Westway, which I believe that you guys visited as well. So everything that was in Westway is also marked up.
Indeed. And the Deputy Convener wants to come in. I'll allow her in. And thank you, Stuart, for asking my question in return.
Thank you, Convener. Morning, gentlemen. Just on that particular thing that you've brought up at the moment, then, just to take that a bit further, we did visit the yard. We visited, but before that, we visited 2 of the sites where all this equipment was stored. So I used to work in the oil industry. I've been in yards before. There seemed to be no, and this was confirmed by, I think, the freight forwarder or somebody, that the materials control and documentation control in relation to all these pieces of equipment was poor. Given that you had oversight and you owned it then, as you're saying now, why are the 2 yards that we saw in such a mess? There's no real layout where you know where the stuff is, and everybody working there seemed to agree with that there was no obvious, and we've heard that you just used a spreadsheet rather than a proper document control system. Can you explain all that, please?
The documentation you refer to will be Ferguson's documentation. Obviously, we are not responsible for how they manage their documentation, but we manage our documentation very, very well. So we have a record of every single piece of equipment that comes in to the shipyard, whether it goes to the stores, whether it goes straight to the ship, whether it goes to Westway. It's recorded as soon as it comes in, and as that piece of equipment moves around, if it goes from Westway to the store, to the yard, to the ship, our site team are marking that up and tracing it every minute, every day. So we know exactly. We have a better quality system than the shipyard did. That's the bottom line. We're professionals, so we know where everything is. That's a fact.
Were you comfortable with the way that it was stored? And because there's a lot of stuff that looks to me that has deteriorated significantly because it's been stored so long.
We really made several comments on this. By and large, it looks worse than it actually is, because a lot of the stuff's, it's covered, so there's, let's be honest, there's pigeon droppings and all that kind of stuff. But everything is protected, and what our team do as well, with the main machinery, we make sure that, if there's any heaters that are required for the anti-condensation, we make sure that that's also, we have regular audits of the stores. So I would say by and large, it's as good as it possibly could have been. But the facilities was poor. It really was poor. Like so many things, it was poor.
Okay, sorry, just before you come in, Kevin, I'm going to push Jim on this, because Tim Hare who took us around the stores at Westway and the other stores, said that he had no idea where the stuff was in the stores, and that the whole point of renting this new factory space that he was renting was to move all the stuff from Westway down there so he could work out what was there and if all the parts that they'd been signed off from was there. You're saying to us that you know exactly what was where, you'd paid for it, it was yours, and Tim Hare therefore is telling us an untruth. I'm confused.
Tim, I don't think Tim would tell you an untruth. We work with Tim, we know Tim. So
Hare, when he said to us he didn't know what was in the stores and where it was factually incorrect.
So going back to my earlier comment there, we have a good system. But Tim has inherited the yard system. So he's kind of going, where's the forms, where's the documentation? Yeah.
I understand your point, and I'm going to bring Angus in. I'll just make the observation to you is that if it's your equipment, which you paid for by milestone payments, you should know where it is. And presumably, you're working with Tim Hare to get these ferries out as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And so you could tell him where all the equipment was if he asked for it, because he couldn't tell us.
We could give that to Tim.
Well, I'm delighted we've done something on this committee, therefore. Angus.
Thanks, Convener. I appreciate your indulgence. I don't want to get bogged down in specific detail, but what springs to mind to me just now in this conversation is the situation with the bow doors. And I'd like to know how using, if we use the inferior bow doors as an example, how come substandard steel was stamped and approved and we've ended up with the bow doors?
The bulbous bow, I think, what we're referring to, yes.
Well, no, there was an issue with the doors as well. With the strength of the frame, I think.
If you want to go on the doors, first of all, yes. Because the doors was something that was highlighted to us during
and the bulbous bow as well.
Yes.
You can do that second.
Aye. Essentially, a lot of the drawings that were put out to the yard for the people, and these are highly skilled people in the shipyard, really, really highly skilled. A lot of the drawings that were put out to them were not finalised, were not approved. There's rules and regulations that's been built up over hundreds of years for the structural strength of bow doors and for bulbous bows. Not written by us, we understand them, they're written by the classification societies, and we have to meet this, particularly in areas like bulbous bows and bow doors. This is where you're taking the full impact of the waves. So there's strict guidance about the calculations for these things. And, the yard go ahead, they send out the drawings, as was reported in earlier evidence session by the workforce. The workforce were even telling the shipyard, the bosses, this isn't right. And what were they told? Crack on. I mean, that was it. I also heard in evidence that the bulbous bow was or it will change. It has changed. It's not been fitted yet because it looked ugly. Have you ever heard anything as ridiculous as that in your life? Seriously, the bulbous bow, if we all know all about ships in here, where is the bulbous bow? Underneath, below the waterline. And we're spending thousands of pounds just because doesn't it look so good? I'm not buying that.
I thought it was the wrong...
it wasn't.
The wrong thickness of steel.
Yes, correct, aye.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll maybe come to that in a minute. Mike, I think you've got the next questions. Mike Rumbles.
Thank you, Convener. I've been trying to, with all the witnesses that we've had so far, to focus on why Ferguson's was awarded the contract in the first place and the due diligence that was in going through that. Now, one previous witness, Roy Pedersen, told the committee he thought it was awarded to Ferguson's through either incompetence, vested interest or corruption. I am not going anywhere near vested interest or corruption, so I want to focus my questions to you on competency. So, and I read through your written submission to us. You said in your written submission that Ferguson were the preferred bidder because they produced the most detailed concept design. Ferguson were also the most expensive. But it was Holder who produced that for Ferguson's, wasn't it? The most detailed concept design. It was the same company that you employed, CMAL employed, in drawing up the tender in the first place. So did alarm bells not ring with you there?
It wasn't just Holder here, it was a combination, and it's all in here. When Ferguson's put together their concept design, which is contained in here, there was a whole array of different specialist companies that they employed to put this together. Not just Holder, several other, I won't name them here, but several other specialists that we know in the marketplace. So that's what gave that good weight when we, particularly around things like hull form and noise and manoeuvring and vibration, all these type of things, yes.
In your written submission to us, because I want to be absolutely clear here, you're saying also need part, you specifically say in paragraph 2.4, notably, Ferguson employed Holder as their designer, the company that had supported the creation of the tender design for inclusion in the invitation for tender. I repeat my question. Yes. Did alarm bells not ring with you then, to use Mr Hobbs's phrase?
Alarm... Can you expand on that? Just alarm bells by using Holder?
Yeah.
Holder are a reputable worldwide naval architecture company.
My point is you've used them
yes.
in the design of the tender.
Yes.
The company that you award uses the same company in their position. So alarm bells didn't ring.
No,
obviously.
no,
Okay,
that's,
I'll go on to my next question.
That's their choice.
So that's not unusual. That is not unusual.
I'm asking about due diligence. You said again in your written submission, and I quote from it, it was up to each shipyard to persuade themselves, and I emphasise the word themselves, it was up to each shipyard to persuade themselves that they were capable of building these ships. You said that in paragraph 7.2. Don't you recognise in the 4 to 5 months that you had, that you took to assess the bids, that due diligence made it your responsibility, CMAL's responsibility over this public money, to do this yourself? Isn't that the whole point of assessing the bids, that the yards can actually do what they say they can? Yes. Did you do that?
That's what we did, yes. And this shipyard, they were already building a ship for us at the time, one of the hybrid ferries. They had previously, just in the couple of years before, built another 2 of these hybrid ferries, and these were first-in-class, world's first, and it's something we should really be proud of in this country. There's no doubt about that. And this was this same shipyard that delivered these vessels. These 2 ships won worldwide shipping awards in 2014 and 2016. This shipyard had a great history and a great pedigree in building CalMac ferries in the past, lots of different types of ships. So this shipyard had the capability of doing this. Where the shipyard started to fail was completely after signing the contract, they changed their strategy. They changed the strategy that they promised us and we signed up for.
What you're saying now, but I'm looking at your written submission to us prior to this session. I repeat it was up to each shipyard to persuade themselves that they were capable of building these ships. I'm puzzled why you would say that to us. It indicates to me that you were saying, well, they've put the tender in using the same company that designed the tender. They were the most expensive tender. You've just confirmed today that they took longer than you would normally have expected them to produce the ships. They had the highest specification, and it seems to me, if you look at the written submission that you've given to us, you are saying, well, it's up to them to decide that. You're in charge of the £97 million of public money, and I'm trying to get to the reason why you recommended approval of Ferguson's if you hadn't checked that they were able to do what they say they were able to do.
Check. So
why did you say that in your written report then?
Maybe that's...
Are we to ignore that in your written submission?
No.
It's maybe not clear. It's maybe not clear to you.
Well, it's very clear. It is very clear.
Well, what I'm saying to you is clearly, I'm clearly telling you here how we go about this.
Yeah.
But it's very, very clear.
It's the opposite of what you've said to us in written form.
I wouldn't say it's the opposite, no.
Okay, but I suppose that's an interpretation. Okay. Ferguson Marine bid. Again, I'm going to why Ferguson's were awarded this. Ferguson Marine bid was £6 million higher than CMAL had budgeted for. So why did you recommend approval of a bid that exceeded the planned budget, particularly when you had also received, and you've already confirmed to us there were 3 bids that met all the requirements, when lower bids had been received? Why was it even higher than your own budget?
When any shipbuilding contract, and I could even say the same about what we're looking at in the way of the new Isla vessel. So the moment we're working on the business case for the new Isla vessel, So at that time, when you set the budget, it's an estimate of the market at that time. Shipbuildings, you know, it changes, it's up and down, it depends how busy yards are and so many other things. So we set that budget way before we actually go out to tender. I mean, we've already set what we think might be the cost estimate for the new Isla boat, and the time you go to the market, it can change. And that's just life.
I just want to confirm one thing, because I've asked other people. I'll ask the Cabinet Secretary this when we eventually get to Cabinet Secretary at the end of the process. But they received a recommendation from their ferries unit to award the contract to Ferguson's. And I asked the ferries unit why they made that decision. They said, well, actually, we just passed it on. It was the decision made by CMAL. And when we had CalMac here, we knew CalMac was involved in the process, and CalMac are pointing the finger at you by saying, well, no, it's nothing to do with us, Governor. It's CMAL that made the recommendation for Ferguson's.
I don't think they pointed the finger at us. The three organisations work really well together. Yes, we are the procurement specialists. We are the design specialists. We're the people that got that know-how.
You did make the recommendation.
We make that
entirely your
recommendation. We make the final recommendation, absolutely. But there is huge input, particularly from CalMac, as we spoke about, as part of the evaluation. Yes, it's a joint exercise. You know, we don't solely just go ahead and go, here's your ship. You know, there's a lot of work with the project group and the tripartite, as you obviously hear about. So, no, it's a good joint effort, and to me, it's very healthy the way the three organisations work, because we have three organisations all working together, but we can ask questions, we can challenge, we can look at the options. So, to me, it works very well, and it's working, and it still continues to work well.
I don't have much more time to ask my questions to you, so I'm going to concentrate really on this. Yes, I appreciate that. You know, we're trying to get to the bottom of what went wrong, and it seems to me this went wrong right from the very beginning of when you recommended Ferguson's for the contract in the first place. It seems to me that there were other problems down the line. Of course there were, and we've heard all of those that added to all of this. But essentially, this contract was awarded to a company that couldn't fulfill it. And it has to be, therefore, something wrong. I hope you would recognise this. There has to be, logically, something wrong in what happened when you examined the capability of Ferguson's to deliver the contract. It strikes me that you've done desktop exercises, you looked at the financials, you've checked all that sort of thing. And that's what alarmed me when I read your written submission, because you seemed to be saying in the written submission, well, it was up to them, Gov. You know, it wasn't up to us to do that. It certainly is up to you to make sure that that tender, acceptable tender that you were recommending eventually to ministers, was the right one. And do you regret recommending Ferguson's? Do you realise that something went wrong in recommending Ferguson's for this?
Not so no recommendation. Regrets. Something went wrong after we signed the contract.
Oh, it was only after we signed the contract?
Absolutely. After
there was
we signed the contract.
nothing wrong before you signed the contract?
This shipyard, as we spoke, we're already building ships for us. Good history of building these types of ships. Forget all of that stuff about the LNG and all that, because that's just smoke and mirrors. This shipyard had a good pedigree, and they still have the good pedigree. So there's 300 odd highly skilled people in here, and I think we're doing them a disservice if we're saying that Scotland can't build ferries and ships.
Nobody is saying that.
Yes.
I was asking you whether you felt.
Yes. This was a failure of management, of new management.
So not your responsibility at all?
Really?
It wasn't anything to do with
really
awarding
none
the contract
whatsoever.
to Ferguson?
We're just going about our normal business, which we're highly skilled in.
And you did everything right?
And we've delivered. We've delivered.
And you did everything right?
I can't even think of one single thing.
So I'd just make the observation, because there's a couple of members lining up, Colin and Richard Lyle, is I think you said new management. It was the point of new management. And in the previous sentence, you said the yard has a history of producing well. But that's not the new management which you're talking about now. So the problem was about the new management that tendered for the contract. But Colin, your question.
No, not the new management who tendered. Not the owners, the people that they put in.
Right, well, somebody
Yes.
sure will pick up
And I
on
think
that.
these people have already been
Colin.
mentioned when the
Colin.
word bullying came up at one of the other
Colin.
sessions.
So when you awarded the contract and you carried out due diligence, certain things were in place and they've disappeared. So the Programme Review Board report and the evidence this committee received from Tim Hare stated that, Mr Hare, in the board's opinion, Ferguson's did not have the necessary management processes in place, such as a defect management system, a robust planning process or a project management system in place. So when you awarded the contract, were all these things in place?
And
were in place.
they all fell by the wayside.
When you say fell by the wayside, did they remove all those systems?
They had them, they just didn't apply them.
They had them, but Mr Hare says they didn't have them. I would have expected to find a project manager who had end-to-end responsibility for the knowledge of the project, but that role did not exist.
Yes.
He also goes on to say there were some planning tools such as those that you described, and this was a question from Stuart Stevenson, but they were badly flawed. So was a project manager in place when you awarded the contract, for example? Were all those systems
Yes.
in place when you awarded?
Yes,
And that was removed.
I would put it the best way, that they had all the tools, they just didn't have the people that knew how to use the tools, or the people that they brought in didn't know how to use the tools, some of them.
So just specifically on planning processes, so Mr Hare said not only was there not a planning process producing what you described, but there was no real prospect, given the number of people in the yard, of creating a planning process. He was very clear on that. So you're saying that there was a planning process you were happy with when you carried out due diligence, but that disappeared. Do you want to elaborate on what we mean by disappeared?
When we start off with standard plans, standard cardinal date programmes, planning tools. The yard set up this fantastic war room with Gantt charts and spreadsheets and everything you could possibly imagine. But it's then getting that information and taking that information and giving it into work packages. That's where you had the failure of getting that information out to the people on the vessel to allow the people on the ship to build the ship efficiently. That's where the gap is.
Okay. And just on the issue of the price, we're clear that this was the highest bid. What we're not clear about is how high it was compared to the others. So you had 7 bids, 4 were ruled out. What was the price on the other 3 bids? How far away were they from Ferguson? Because one of the questions we have is, was this bid enough to actually build these vessels within the price agreed? But how far away was it from the other 3 bids that you received?
Yeah, there was a range. This was the highest. There is a process which we've gone through, which is the quality matrix versus the price, and that comes up with an overall score. And Ferguson's won that outright. So, as far as the actual prices are concerned, we're not able to share those with you because there's confidentiality clauses in everybody's individual bids.
Just in general, then, so it's difficult for us to assess how far away the other bids were from a price point of view. So how far away, roughly, were they? Are we talking about tens of millions? What percentage difference was there between what was bidded by female and the other bids?
There were 6 compliant bids, which we've stated already, and in a broad sense, there's a range of about 15%, top to bottom. And there are a couple which were very, very close, extremely close. And that's as far as we can say.
Colin, Richard Lyle, you wanted to come in before I move to Peter Chapman.
Jim, to the side of his 3 big, large books you pointed out that basically the specs and the tender. After they won the contract, who lays out, when you build a ship, you plan the inside of the ship, you design the inside of the ship. So, who done that?
Ferguson's.
Right.
Yes.
So, but you're also telling us that the workforce were told to go on with it, even though they were putting the wrong things in the ship. And there was also supposed to be prefabrication outside the yard, and then it would come along and be put together. And that didn't happen.
No. This is probably one of the key areas why this has ended up the way it's ended up. When we evaluated Ferguson's, we know the yard very well. Our headquarters is across the road from the shipyard, so we look into
150 metres from the yard.
we know the size, we know the capacity, we know what they're capable of producing. And in these documents here, as part of their planning and their detailed project management plans in here, The plan was not to build the 2 complete ships in that shipyard. The plan was to build the 2 hulls for 801 and 802. And when we talk about the hulls, we're talking about the bit from the vehicle deck to the keel. So that part, the bit that sits in the water, that was the strategy, to build the hulls for 801 and 802 and the superstructure, everything above the decal deck, the side casings, the accommodation, the bridge, was to be built at 2 other locations in the UK.
Well, outside the yard,
Outside the
and
yard.
other locations to be brought along and put on the ship as it was being built.
It's a familiar model. It's the same model as when we went to Germany in Loch Seaforth, whereby you then launch the hull to the vehicle deck, you launch it 801, bring it to the outfit quay, and I know members have been to the yard, so you bring that along there, and then these other units will be barged, taken to the outfit quay, lifted by crane and popped onto the actual hull. And then 802, we start the same sequence. That was the strategy. And this strategy actually, it's worth adding, it was written by people who were in the shipyard at that time, that had worked in that shipyard for so many years. And by the time we actually got there, these people were gone.
So we're getting to the nub, and if you bear with me, Convener. So basically, the people who were there, who were successful prior to getting this contract, had left after that contract was won, and are you really honestly saying that the people who were then in charge couldn't tell the workforce how to do it right?
I wouldn't say that. They were basically proceeding and telling them just get on with it.
Thanks.
It's incredible. I find it really just incredible we're even having this conversation, how these people behaved.
Thank you, Mr. I'm going to briefly bring in Angus on a question which he wanted to ask later on, but it fits into this. So I'm going to take Angus's question here, and then Peter Chapman.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Just following on from the issue of the superstructures that were to be fabricated off-site and then shipped to the yard by barge. That methodology wasn't followed. So where were the superstructures originally due to be built, and why was the change made? And how did CMAL react to this fundamental change in construction method that was proposed? What did you do when Ferguson's decided to go against the original plan?
As soon as it happens, we write to them and we say, what's happening? What's your strategy? Give us your new plans. Oh, we've got it all under control. We said, you have not got this under control. So we write to them. I've actually got copies of papers of the very first letters that we sent to them to say, this is a change of plan. This is a complete change of strategy, and it won't work. You just don't have the space for this. So we can do no more than that. You know, us as a buyer, we can't halt, we can't hinder what the yard do. We can't put our site team in me and say, hey, stop welding, stop fabricating. You know, we can write, we take it up to the highest level to say this is not going. But the yard continued to say, right up until July 2017, we signed this contract in October 2015, and in up until July 2017, the yard was still saying to us, CMAL, stop writing to us, stop saying that we know we're not going to deliver these ships in time and budget. We've got this under control. And that was at several meetings with the yard senior management, with their owners, saying we've got it under control, right through to July 17. But by that time, there was the new CEO was in place. I think he came in March 2017. The CEO who they just started, obviously the earlier CEO who'd been our managing director, that had been in the company for countless years, he was gone. New managing director. That new managing director was replaced just before this July 2017. I'll come on to this July 2017. The two senior production managers who were instructing the workforce to proceed and build these ships, and even though the folk on the boat were saying, well, we don't think this is right, they were, I don't know if they were dismissed or whatever, but suddenly they're all gone. And then we get to the point in July 2017 where we go from everything's fine, CMAL, you're saying that we're not on track, we're not on budget, to suddenly, here's a claim, which was, you know, best part of just over £17 million out of nowhere. And I'll never ever forget that meeting for a long, long time, when we went, me and my projects director went in, with someone had never met before from the parent company, the CEO, the project manager and the chief naval architect. And the project manager and the chief naval architect couldn't even look at us. They couldn't even look at us because they knew what was coming. And they couldn't look me in the eye because they didn't believe it themselves. They knew it wasn't to be true. So we've gone from us as the buyer. We highlight this at the highest levels, actually. You know, ministers, everybody knows about this. And Ferguson's continue. We will build on time. We are going to look at new strategies. We're going to do this. And then nearly 2 years into the contract, they go, oh, hang on, we've got a problem.
Jim.
Sorry.
I need to let Angus in, and I need to move on to some of the other questions, because I want to take a brief pause in a minute. So, Angus.
At the initial point where you learned that the original plan with regard to the superstructures wasn't going to be followed, could that not have been classed as a breach of contract at that point?
No. Really, no.
No.
There's nothing in the contract that would allow us to terminate the contract for the yard changing their strategy.
Okay.
Very briefly, Colin, because I want to move on to Peter.
Clearly, you believed that that would mean that they could not deliver what you were buying, effectively, and you just said that ministers were aware of this. When did you make ministers aware of this, and who did you make aware of this? Because clearly you had concerns that this was not going to be delivered on time based on that significant change.
Early as March 2016.
And which ministers did you make aware?
Well, we obviously report through Transport Scotland.
And they made ministers aware of the
absolutely.
You believed that
I report on this, and I think my reports are available on when all the downloads from the yard get into administration. It's all there. It's all very, very clear to say.
Which ministers did Transport Scotland make aware of these concerns?
I don't know. We would have to ask.
That question.
Yes.
Okay. Peter, yours is the next question.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Gentlemen, former managers at Female told the committee that CMAL audited the yard annually and found it to be performing to a very high standard. Can you outline what this audit process involved and how these audit findings are compatible with the claimed substantial failures of the Ferguson Marine Yard?
It wasn't a full quality audit at all. This audit is what we carry out with all suppliers. It's done by our procurement side. This audit isn't on a full quality audit of the ship and the shipyard and their systems. This is looking at the wider benefits of placing contracts with any supplier. It will look at training. It will look at community benefits. It looks at apprentices. It looks at how do you manage your sub-suppliers. This is not looking at the report would suggest that that's the case, but this is no more than what's the benefits of this contract. And obviously I found that of interest, seeing that, and I read the submission by FMAL, and what's worthy of note on the submission, I forget the page number on it, when we have our two spreadsheets here with the score. What was interesting about the second one, we make some comments on that, and basically the second one, the score is the same, high score for the benefits, not for the quality system, even though it would appear that way. But actually the comments were different from the comment form that we sent to them. And one of the comments that we made was actually, can you give us evidence that you're paying your suppliers in time? And that comment, for whatever reason, is not in the submission that was sent to this committee.
But I mean, I'm amazed at that response, to be honest, because surely the auditing process of the yard should be much more robust than that. I mean, you're awarding.
Well, that's what I do. Sorry,
£100 million contract a yard, and you haven't. You're saying the audit is just all superficial.
My audit is in my monthly report. Absolutely, and in the project meetings that we have with the shipyard, where everything is recorded, everything. But that's a separate audit. That's not the audit of the yard's performance. That's the audit of training and apprenticeships and doing charitable work and these kind of things. That's what that audit was.
So you're saying there is a robust audit system. So if there is a robust audit system, why didn't it flag up the fact that, as appears was the case, this yard wasn't capable to build these ships.
We started to flag up our concerns in March 2016 that the ships would be late.
I mean, and the other thing you state in written evidence that the limitations of space to fabricate hulls 801 and 802 alongside one another seems the most obvious reason for Ferguson Marine's predicament. And you also state that Ferguson were granted a longer period to build the vessels. You've already told us that. So the yard could be reconfigured to create more space. So the question there is, wasn't this obvious lack of space not considered by CMAL before the contract was awarded? Because you were up front, you actually knew that they couldn't deliver the two ships built side by side, and yet you awarded the contract.
Yes, but that, as my earlier response there, the yard's plan in here was not to build the two ships side by side. That changed after we signed the contract. The plan was build hull 801, just the hull, just those units. That doesn't take up a lot of space in the shipyard. The superstructure elsewhere in 2 locations, launch 801, and then start the same process for 802. That was the plan.
So the plan was to launch 801 long before it was at the stage when it was finally launched, although it was pretty superficial, the launch as well, and that we know that the windows in the superstructure were actually just painted on.
Yes.
But the plan was to launch that hull much earlier and then start to build 802 in that space.
And the other plan was, as we call it, advanced pre-outfitting. But the other plan is, when you're at the unit stage, if you've been down in those ships, apart from maybe below decks, I don't know if you got the chance to go to the engine room and have a look, but essentially above the vehicle deck, it's empty shells. It really is empty shells in all of these spaces. And the plan was, as you go along and you build the units, to actually start to do all this pre-outfit work, all the fastenings, all the hot work, so that allows you to start actually installing equipment throughout the ship as you go along with the blocks. And it didn't happen.
Okay.
To be a appropriate moment to suspend the committee for 5 minutes. I'd like to ask if you're all back here at 11:21 ready to go. So I suspend the meeting for 5 minutes. I'd like to bring this session of the committee back into session, as it were. I've just got some questions before we lead on with the next question on contractual payments, and you've explained why you gave the 15 milestone payments opposed to the normal 5, the 20%. And I understand that. What I haven't been able to find out is, and we asked Transport Scotland last week, of how many of those payments have actually been made. So are you in a position to tell me how many of the payments have been made?
Yes, on the Glen Sannox, which is Hull 801, we have made 14 of the original 15 payments. And on 802, we have 5 payments still to go. So there is a batch of payments amounting to £1.2 million times 4, broadly around the time of launch. A couple just before launch, one at launch, and one.
So just remind me on 802, what percentage of payments have you done?
We have paid about 78%.
Okay, so on 801 you paid 85%.
Yeah.
And 802 you paid 78%.
No, on 801 we've paid 90%.
90%.
Yes.
So you paid 90% of that and 78% of 802.
The time-stamped one that you have got actually changed later on before the contract was signed. So
that would have been helpful to have, but no doubt you can let us have that, and you can let us have
absolutely.
a payment.
That's
I mean,
no problem.
Where I struggle slightly with this, Kevin, having been a surveyor in a previous life and managed contracts, is that when you do stage payments, which obviously happen during the phase of a contract, is that you have a QS go in, identify how much of the work has been carried out, and you make payments to total no more than that work. So if the builder or the contractor goes wrong, you end up with the ownership, as Jim has said, of the material that equates to the money you paid. Just my maths isn't quick enough to do this, but it appears to me that you paid round about between 85 million and 90 million on the 2 boats.
82.5.
Okay, thank you for correcting my maths. 82.5.
14.5 still to pay.
Okay, so you've got £82.5 million of a contract. And I don't think that anyone on this committee would feel that there was that level of work on the slipway. I see, Stuart. That level of work on the slipway when we went there, because 802 was not anywhere near 78% complete, and there wasn't anywhere near 78% of the material in the warehouses that we saw.
Your first comment is correct. So have we got £82.5 million worth of value? Absolutely not, is the answer. But going back to one of the comments which we made earlier on, through the vesting process, basically all the equipment, bar some very small parts, are actually either on site or there at Westway. That actually amounts overall to about £64 million. We're probably £2 million shy of that at the moment. So that is what we have as materials, both unmade, made machinery and equipment. That is all on site and it's all accounted for.
Okay.
And we know the value of it. We didn't know the exact value of it until the business went into administration and Tim Hare, the turnaround director, turned up. But he has shared that with us since. So we know.
Kevin, sorry. Tim Hare, when he saw us, couldn't tell us what equipment was in the shed and wasn't in it. But you're saying he's now confirmed to you that you've got that value of equipment in the shed.
Correct.
I don't understand that.
Okay, well.
Jim, could you shed light on that?
I'm sure his procurement department will know exactly how much they've paid for all the equipment. I'm sure they've got a bottom line on how much.
So he knows exactly what's in the shed and how much has been paid for it, because that's not the evidence he gave us.
There, but I'm sure that you've got major suppliers, but it probably isn't broken down in Tim's sheet to all the subcomponents. So he'll probably have all the high-line figures, the Watzillas, the McGregors, the electrical part, the Kongsbergs, the big numbers.
Okay, so just finally, before we move on to one or two other members who've got question on this, is you said earlier in the evidence session that you started to have concerns about the ability of Ferguson Marine to deliver the ferries in March 2016. And you notified those up the chain of command through Transport Scotland. Yet you still appear to be making payments against the work that they're doing. Surely a sane person would say, I'm worried, I'm not making any more payments until I know that what I'm paying for has been built. Why did you make those payments?
I'll answer that. So basically we get completion certificates, and we only paid for each completion certificate. A completion certificate is absolutely the point of crystallisation of
the completion certificates.
Sorry. The completion certificates are given to us by the yard. Our people on site, Jim's team, effectively confirm that that milestone has been reached, and then a payment is made.
And who makes the payment? No, sorry, Kevin. Kevin, I don't want to get bogged down in this. I want to try and just ask it specifically.
Yes.
Jim's team have signed off that that work has become, whether it's, I don't know, 35% of fabrication or whatever it is that the milestone is. He's signed it off.
Yes.
He passes it to CIMA, and you hold the sufficient funds to pay that money off.
Yes.
So the funds are in your bank account. So you don't have to go to anyone in the Scottish Government to draw down funds to make that payment.
I believe that will be transparent to you when you get what you asked for last week. But the way that it works is that there is a completion certificate. Jim and his team sign it off. It goes to our accounts. It could be £1 million, it could be £12 million. We hold enough money to pay that immediately, and we try to pay everybody within 10 days of an invoice. When that happens, we then draw down the voted loan, but we have enough money in our bank to make that payment immediately. The voted loan usually follows within 5 or 6 working days.
So who signs off the voted loan?
The government.
So the government would be aware that you're making these payments
Absolutely.
during the thing, and would be signing the money back to you,
Yes.
so you could continue to make the payments.
Absolutely.
So despite the fact that you are alerting in March 2016 there are problems with the shipyard and the contract and a delay to it, the government are still signing off payments to the tune of £82 million against a £97 million contract. I find that really hard to believe. Perhaps you could explain to me why I shouldn't.
Each certificate of completion relates directly to a milestone payment or something on the Cardinal Date programme, one of the 15. If that has been reached, we contractually cannot refuse to pay it. It is as simple as that.
Even if you don't think that, I mean, sorry, you paid off 82 million of 97 million pounds. You don't have 82 million pounds worth of construction and parts in the yard. I don't understand that.
We should not be massively adrift at any point in time. So we have 64 million pounds worth of value in the vested equipment. We should have had 33 million pounds worth of labour. Now we know now that it's cost an awful lot more than that because of the inefficiencies of the yard. However, if you look at what we have floating and you add that to the vested amount of money and what we have on the slipway, there is a gap on the original contract price of 97, which still holds for us. So somewhere in the region of a £5 or £6 million gap. That is all.
So when these ferries are completed, if they're completed on time, as per Tim Hare's suggestion, which requires another 110 million, you paid off 82 million, the government's given a loan of 45 million, so a 98 million pound contract. At the moment, all things being equal and running in a fair wind, is about 250 million pounds. Is that right?
The maths works out perfectly. However, contractually, we, CMAL, and I know this isn't the answer that you want, but we, CMAL, will pay £97 million for that vessel.
Okay,
and that is what we signed up to. And when the business was brought out of administration and it's in Ferguson Marine Port, Glasgow, we have a novated contract that still means that we pay 97 million. Now, I am not completely foolish. I know that the government lent the business 45 million. We understand what Tim Hare is saying in terms of the 110.3 million, including all the contingencies and stuff like that. If you add it up, your numbers are not incorrect. Somebody has to pay for it, but CMAL isn't.
No, the Scottish taxpayers are.
Yeah.
Stuart.
I just wanted to check some aspects of the numbers comparatively briefly. We've got 64 million of assets vested to us, so of the 82.5 million that has been put into the yard in relation to this contract, the difference between 64 and 82.5 is 17.5. I beg your pardon, 18.5. 18.5, and there's 15.5 remaining. So therefore, in terms of what the yard contractually would have expected to be paid for effort, as distinct from materials, you've paid for about 55% of the effort that the contract provides for. Now, that's leaving aside the fact that we no longer think that properly reflects the effort that would be required because of the way they're working. But I just want to check that that is where we are. So when we were signing off payments, we were actually largely signing off for assets that you would own, and only to the extent of some 17.5 million were you signing off for effort that the yard had made.
So
I'm only asking about arithmetic, not beyond that.
So your arithmetic is correct. Our assessment is that, yes, we've paid for 55%. We probably, in terms of value, have got 40%. And that is where the gap, that is the risk gap.
Well, that does leave me with a little problem, because if you say that the 55% actually represents 40%, you're therefore saying that the unpaid for future effort, which is the remaining 60%, therefore would constitute a figure of 28 million pounds, as distinct from the 15.5 that the contract would provide, and therefore that it should only cost a further 13 or 14 million to complete the contract at the efficiency rate they've been working. Now, I'm a mathematician, not necessarily a good arithmetician, so I might be getting the numbers wrong, but the numbers we're getting to complete the contract are entirely at variance with what I've just articulated there. So why?
Because the shipyard was hopelessly inefficient.
Yes. But you've given a measure of the inefficiency, if I may, sorry, and I accept it's your measure, not their measure. Yeah. You've said you paid for 55% of the effort. Roughly, these are rounded numbers, but you got 40% of the effort you would expect. So therefore, there's 60% to come. You've paid 17.5 for that 40%. Therefore, to get to 100% is 1.5 times 17.5, which is in the region of 27, 28 million pounds. But to add that to the 97 million only takes you a very short distance towards the numbers we're now being told are required to complete. And it just doesn't compute for me. And I, to the extent you can give me some help in understanding that, I'd welcome your doing so.
I think we're right to you on it. Very simply, it's probably easier to do that.
Okay, Colin.
On the issue of payments, and I appreciate these are not your direct payments, these were government loans, but you've got something to say on this issue in your evidence. The Scottish Government obviously appointed Luke Van Beek, and in your written evidence to the committee you say that Mr Van Beek personally sanctioned the drawdown of £30 million of public funds against designated progress events that were never fulfilled by the yard. You go on to say, to this day, these activities remain unfinished. So you're alleging that £30 million of payments were made for work that was never completed. That's quite a serious allegation to make.
That is 100% correct. So if you look at our written evidence, you can see part of the Cardinal Date programme that was rescheduled in 2018, and that had a whole series of dates of delivery against it, and not a single one of those was achieved.
So £30 million worth of taxpayers' money was paid for work that you've set out in your evidence around shore power supply tests, etc., that was never completed, and this was flagged up to government, was it?
This was major activities. Again, we don't know how that 30 million was spent, but there still was activities, you know, in the yard and on the ships on 801 and 802. For these major activities were not done, so I don't think it would be fair to say that nothing was happening in the shipyard. You know, we don't know how that money was spent within the shipyard, but certainly what we can say is Mr Van Beek, and we only saw the reports when they were uploaded as well. We weren't privy to those reports, but it was reporting that these activities had been achieved. And quite frankly, I was gobsmacked when I
And who did you flag up your concerns to over that these payments were being made for work that you were aware wasn't being completed?
We weren't involved in any of the payments. We had no sight of any payments whatsoever, none whatsoever.
I mean, just to clarify, maybe there is people being a bit economical with the truth. So it was indicated by Mr Van Beek that he was in constant contact with us. We met him twice. So we met him on the 24th of September, which was an introductory meeting. We had no sight of anything that he was doing in the yard, full stop, end of story. We didn't even know the frequency that it was in the yard. We then met him on the 21st of January, where he is claiming in his submission and was speaking about us, saying that it was a bit of a fractious meeting. And yes, it was a bit of a fractious meeting, not a nasty meeting, but we started asking him questions such as this and said, look, you know, where are you with the payment schedule? And he said, well, I've been signing off payments. There wasn't any details around that. And we said, well, the metrics that we've got in front of us would indicate that nothing's been done. His answer to that was, oh, yes, it has. I've been told by the people in the shipyard that it's done. And we turned around and said, well, I suggest you get your overalls on and get out there and have a look, because not a single one of them has been done.
And what was the Scottish Government officials' response? They were in the room on the 24th of January when you say that Mr Van Beek told Scottish Government officials and yourself that all these activities had been completed, and you're saying you'd said they have not been completed. What was the response from Scottish Government officials to that? Because they effectively were signing off payments of, or the government were signing off £30 million worth of payments, and you were saying that this work had not been completed. So what was their response to that?
I think they looked pretty shocked. I mean, we didn't have any further discussion with them. I think what you have to understand is that the £45 million never came across our door. We didn't even know that it was happening. We found out that the 30 million was being loaned to the business the day that Mr Mackay stood up and said it, and we found out about the 15 that had been lent in the previous September when it was exposed through FOI. So we had no indication at all. There is a complete and utter Chinese wall between Transport Scotland and effectively what was Scottish Government economy. So we didn't know what was going on.
Sorry, Colin, I'm going to have to leave it there because we are got a lot of questions, a lot of members want to come in. Richard Lyle, you have the next question.
Yeah, just to finish off what was being asked here. So is it normal practice to pay invoices that you receive within 10 days?
That is our ambition. I think at the moment we're running at about 11. But
so
yes, we pay promptly. That is something which we are proud of.
If you're sent an invoice saying that I've done this work,
yes,
you then say, well, they've done that work, so we'll pay them.
No. As we said earlier on, there is a certificate of completion given to us. It is then verified by Jim's Vessels team. So I would be asking, as the accountable officer to Parliament for this company, CMAL, I would be asking the question: has this work been done? If Jim and his team say yes, the work's been done, the milestone payment has been reached, the certificate, which comes along with an invoice, we would then pay that invoice, without doubt.
Okay. Right. So, what, if any, dialogue did you have with Transport Scotland or any other part of the Scottish Government between submitting your recommendation of preferred bid to them and Transport Scotland subsequently passing that recommendation on to ministers on the 20th of August 2015? And if you did, what was the nature of any dialogue?
To my knowledge, we didn't have any, so we made a recommendation.
Yeah.
That recommendation was for the government to accept or not accept, or Transport Scotland and pass it up to ministers.
Yep.
What I can say is after the 28th of August and leading up to the 31st, when the First Minister announced the preferred bidder, from that point onwards, we didn't sign a contract until the 16th of October. And there was quite a lot of discussion went on because what had been promised in the tender submission, such as the bank guarantees and some other elements, they started basically going back on their word. So we obviously had to highlight that, and that partially relates to the letter which was quoted earlier on from our chairman. So basically, from the time that the preferred bidder was announced, which let's call it 31st, so from the 1st of September to the 16th of October, there was quite a lot of toing and froing, and you know, in many respects, as an organisation, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, because
some people have suggested it was done the other way around, but you actually are saying 20th of August we recommended Ferguson, and the government then announced it at the end of the month.
On the 31st, yeah.
Right.
So,
right. Here's the question that everybody's been asking, and there's been a lot of speculation over this question. So I'm sure you will tell me exactly what happened. Did Scottish ministers, the Scottish Government or Transport Scotland ever put any pressure, direct or indirect, on CMAL as a corporate entity or any individual associated with CMAL to award this contract to any particular bidder?
no.
Can you repeat that, please? I'm getting deaf a wee bit.
No.
No, thank you.
I can shout it louder, but no.
Yeah, I'll say it because, you know, people have come in here and suggested that everybody was palsy-walsy, as I said last week, and everybody was suggesting that there were several deals done or behind-the-scenes deals done. So you're telling us, on your expertise, on your history in the shipbuilding trade, that you looked at this contract, you decided that the best person to get this contract was Ferguson Marine, and they got it because of their price, their quality and their past reputation. Is that correct?
100% correct.
Thank you very much. That's me, Convener.
We move on to the next question, which is the Deputy Convener, Maureen Watt. Maureen.
Thank you, Convener. In your submission in 2.4, you mentioned that Ferguson's had very few naval architects of their own, and the committee has heard in previous sessions that a major source of the problems with this project was the development of basic and detailed designs from the concept design set out in the contract documentation. So CMAL, as the contractor, you had someone, Holder Marine, draw up a basic design on which you based the ITT, invitation to tender. And then Holder went on to develop the designs further with you and with Ferguson's, who were awarded the contract. So can you just outline how this process works in practice?
Yes. When we start pre-PQQ and ITT, what we do is we carry out our stage is feasibility. There's lots of discussion about what's a concept design, a basic design, a detailed design. We carry out a feasibility analysis. That's what we do. So we look at what the requirements are for the new vessel, and we then engage with naval architects. In fact, in this case, there was actually two other companies. There was another company that was also part of the pre-ITT stage. So we carry out feasibility. Proof that this will work, not the LNG, you know, because I want to get away. Can this thing float? Will this ship operate at 16.5 knots? Can we carry these cars? Can we carry all the deadweight? Because obviously trucks and all the rest of it. It's these basic elements of naval architecture. That's what we carry out, so that when we ask the yard, can you build a ship that can go this speed, carry this, we know it's feasible. So you don't want to ask for something that's impossible. Then, when we put our requirements, we go out with a specification about this, and it's no more than a set of requirements. So the work that we get done with Holder, I wouldn't describe that as concept design. It's feasibility. That's that stage. And then when the shipyard, when they submit their offers, all 7 offers that we got, they all come back with their concept designs based upon our statement of requirements and our guidance drawing. We give them a guidance drawing as a starting point, you know, how we think the passenger layout should be, but it's no more than, you know, a 2D type drawing. We don't design the hull for them or the propulsion, we just prove the concept. So then the shipyard, they, at the ITT stage, and here I keep referring to this, they then show their proof of concept. And it's not just a drawing, it's not just a specification. Within this document, it's everything. Manoeuvring plots, it's stability, it's seakeeping, all these things that demonstrate and give us the reassurance that the yards know how to build the ship. So that's the stages. Now, I've probably forgotten what the question was now.
Well, it was just to give us an idea of how it works. So Holder plus others did what you required of them to your satisfaction, and then Ferguson's with Holder took it, and others took it to a further stage. So at no point were Holder or anybody else not doing what they were contracted to do.
Certainly not from our point of view, no.
Right, okay. So,
sorry, can I just come in there briefly? So, depending on what shipyard it is, depends on how they go about, you know, designing a ship. So, some shipyards have a very big team which is embedded in the yard. They're their employees, and they actually do the detailed design. So that's what happens at Flensburg, for instance. Other shipyards subcontract that out, and that's what happened with Ferguson's. And, you know, there's no right and wrong way, provided if you subcontract it out, or you have people in your own yard that you're managing them successfully. So in the case of Ferguson's, we knew that they didn't have a big team. We knew they would use a third party, and they used a third party called Holders and Vera Navis.
okay. So did you agree to Ferguson Marine starting constructions of the vessels before the basic and detailed designs were substantially complete?
No.
Did the contract allow you to take any action to halt or slow construction until designs were signed off?
No.
So, you said earlier that drawings were put out to the yard which hadn't been cleared as fit for purpose to the workers to get on with it, although they hadn't been cleared and as complete. Why was that?
We're talking mainly around structural drawings here in steelwork. There's a whole lot of other drawings and the systems that go in a ship, but this is primarily about steelwork. They have to be approved by the Classification Society, and you know the plate thicknesses, whether it's 10 mil, 12 mil, and the yard decided to build at risk. This isn't as catastrophic as everybody's kind of thinking, perhaps. It's in certain areas. It wasn't as if they had to rebuild the hulls. You know, it's not as if the steelwork is scrapped, but just that very nature of, not just because of the steelwork, they didn't take care of all the other activities that should be going along with the steelwork. You know, as I spoke earlier on, the pre-outfitting, getting the pumps all in. It was just chasing steel. That's really...
Sorry, chasing
steel. Just get some steelwork done.
Yes, but we now know that some of the steel wasn't strong enough to hold the bow doors. We know that the capstans are not strong enough to hold the vessel at port.
We report that. We write to the yard, the Classification Society, write to the yard.
Given that you were making payments, why were they doing this? Because the bulk of our payments are mainly, there's some steelwork payments in here, but this is not the whole ship. The 100% of the steel is not correct. This is, I don't know what the figures would be, to be quite honest, but this is, our payments are mainly for equipment, you know, what we take title of as well. So that's our main payments.
I think it's worth...
But do they not get payments according to the deadweight that's added?
The deadweight, we only find out what the deadweight is once the ship's built. You know, that's done at the later stage once the ship's designed and built.
I think it's probably worth just exploring the chronology and what happens in a normal shipyard, okay? So, briefly, okay, very briefly, a normal shipyard in let's call it a 30-month build programme would spend a year designing the ship to the nth degree, okay? Now, what happens during that period is they would share those designs with us as owners, with CLAS and with FLAG, which is the MCA. That is the normal process. They then know that everything is covered and they get going. That is not the methodology, and Jim has mentioned building at risks that Ferguson's took. Ferguson's were designing as they went along. They were sending drawings out onto the shipyard floor for construction without sign-off by us or by Lloyds, and that is a major part of the failure. Because effectively they were building at risk. That then means that the blocks and ultimately the vessel has many mistakes that have to be rectified. If you're undoing work you've already done and then have to do it again, that then means the efficiency of the yard goes down. And that probably explains £45 million of lost money. You know, so for every hour that you're expecting an hour's worth of work, you can be at 15 minutes, at which point your labour charges are 4 times what they should be.
So when Ferguson say that you were requiring changes at every single stage virtually, is their assertion,
Yeah.
you were just trying to rectify faults?
No,
that,
no, we weren't. No.
well,
So
if you're saying that things were going out that weren't classified,
that is not our responsibility.
okay, can you explain how,
Okay, so there
why
is
Ferguson's are saying that about you?
because they're not being truthful, very simply. So basically, within the contract, there is something called the change management process. The change management process should highlight every single change, and it does. So Jim has probably got the list here. We can share the list with you. There were 111 changes, 30 of which were never progressed. We discussed them. It wasn't worth looking at them. 46 of those were prompted by Ferguson's, 35 were prompted by us. What is the net effect of all of that? We had to pay Ferguson's an extra £1.55 million across 2 ships, which is 1.6% of the contract value. Our normal contingency, when we look at Loch Seaforth, we look at Finlaggan, was about 3%. So the number of changes that we were asking and discussing formally with the yard all through this contract was probably about half the rate that we would normally expect it to be. So what they are describing is their own mistakes. That is the issue.
Just very quickly, no, very quickly.
Again,
It's on
maybe.
the same subject.
No, just...
Okay, well, that'll be it.
When the yard talk about whatever these changes are, these changes are what I would describe as iterations of the drawing and design development. This is normal. This is routine, whereby when you start building a ship and designing a ship, you start with a blank piece of paper, you issue the first drawing. You don't have all the information at that stage. You know, it's not just steelwork, it's everything else. It's pipework, it's electrical, it's insulation, everything that makes the ship. And it'll go through various iterations, and there's thousands of drawings, and each one of these drawings, actually the yard actually had a reasonable quality control system for their drawings, actually with regard to the revisions. So any good quality system, you'll see the revisions, and any change, be it, and remember this isn't changes on the ship, this is changes on the drawing. That's where I see these changes being. And to think that the yard didn't mention these changes until July 2017, does that not strike you as being a bit strange, whereby the contract's very, very clear. Clause 24 of the contract allows the yard for any changes to come at us and ask for more money. And do you think they were that naive that they didn't think, because these things all relate back to items in 2016. And I attended every single one of the project meetings with the Yards team, and at not one of these meetings did the senior people at that meeting suggest anything about changes or interference. Sorry.
Mike, you had a question.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to come on the back of Maureen's question to you about Holder. Earlier on, in answer to me, you said it's quite normal. My question earlier on was, you involved Holder in designing the tender, and Ferguson was chosen because actually they used Holder to design their system through that. My question really is, any of the other bidders use Holder, or was it just Ferguson?
No, I don't think anyone else used Holder.
But you said to me it was quite normal to use...
Yes, that is quite normal.
But they were the only one to use it. So it's not
they
that
were the only
normal.
one.
It's not that normal then.
No, it can be quite normal, but remember these are all various shipyards and they'll have their own way of business.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question is from Angus. Angus.
Okay, thanks. Convener, staying with the development of the vessel design, one of the key issues raised by FML during evidence was the level of changes made to the design, as we've rehearsed already today. And we've seen FML and CMAL effectively blaming each other for the number and complexity of design changes required. Now, CMAL and the former management of FML have presented entirely different accounts of the number, importance and impact of changes made to the design of the two ferries. So can you provide any evidence, and I think you maybe referred to it earlier, to support your version of events?
Yes is the answer, and we've already said that we would share with you the change order process, which has the 111 on and all the details around it. That is Jim has it there. That is it.
I have it here. This is
Ferguson's
controlled document of all the changes. It's not our document. It's the agreed the document that registers every change that's been raised.
If you could send that electronically to the clerks after the meeting, that'd be useful. Then it can be circulated.
That would be very helpful. Also, in your written evidence, you state that, and I quote, Ferguson had possibly from the outset underestimated the task entrusted to them. So, what assurance can you offer this committee that CMAL itself did not underestimate the complexity of delivering these vessels, notwithstanding your comment earlier that the original plan was not to build 801 and 802 at the same time?
Sorry, can you repeat just part of that again? Sorry.
Okay, you've stated in your evidence that Ferguson had possibly from the outset underestimated the task entrusted to them. So we're looking for an assurance from you that CMAL itself didn't underestimate the complexity of delivering these vessels.
These vessels really are the routine ferries. They're not any different from any other ferries that we've got in the fleet. The piping for the gas is probably the main thing, but this is routine. This was done by, put together by a yard that have built these ferries before. They know what it takes. So we were assured that the yard would be able to design and build these ships.
Okay, fair enough.
Thanks, Angus. Rachel, did you want to come in briefly?
Can I just ask you a question there about the change order and the 111 changes? Did that have to be signed off by CMAL?
Both parties.
So both parties, Ferguson's and CMAL.
Yes.
And did the Scottish ministers have any, input into
No,
that?
these are routine type things.
Yeah. So the changes, did they? I think I might be going over ground here, but I'm new to the committee, so I need to get this established. The 111 changes, did they come with a price tag?
Yes.
Right. And that price tag was?
1.55 million.
Right. And that price tag was so for example, at the time it would have been Derek Mackay. He knew that those changes were going to be accepted.
I'm not 100% sure. Within the voted loan, we have a contingency of 3%, and that level of detail, granularity, I very much doubt got to ministers at the end of the day. So the way the change order process works, if you're taking an individual one, Ferguson's are saying, we don't think this is needed, we might agree or disagree, okay? So equally, we might say, and Jim will give a couple of examples of this, we might say, well, we would like something extra. If we want something extra, then that would come usually at a cost and usually at a time penalty. As it happened, there weren't any time penalties, but, they came at a cost. The cost across all of the 81, of which, to repeat, 46 of theirs and 35 of ours, accumulated across the two ships at 1.55 million. We would ordinarily expect that to run at around 3%, and the ministers would not have that level of detail. The only time we would flag it up is if we were asking to increase the voted loans and all of a sudden the changes became 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%.
Okay.
And I know Jim's itching to give us an example. It may have to wait till we get the form, because there are a lot of questions, and I don't want to impinge on other committee members. And I want to come to Emma Harper. Emma.
Thank you, Convener. Just a couple of questions about how the relationship between CMAL and Ferguson's broke down. And last week I raised the issue because it seems a bit of a he said, she said, and we took like different examples from the various references that we've taken so far. And in your submission it says that you strongly refute the assertion by Mr McCall to the committee that CMAL refused to engage with a mediation process or to negotiate mediation terms. So I guess my first question is, what do you think happened to the relationship? Why did it break down to the extent it did? And then what lessons have been learned from that?
We don't believe it broke down to the extent that is claimed, is the first thing to say. So there are two levels of engagement. There's weekly and monthly meetings in the yard, which Jim would attend, and that is with the senior management team of the yard, and they carried on absolutely without fault up until August, the middle of August 2019, when the yard went into administration. So there was no problem there whatsoever. So that's point number one. Point number two is that I used to meet regularly with originally the first managing director and then the second managing director or CEO that sat here and gave evidence a few weeks ago. We kept on meeting regularly, for sure. What changed and what became a little bit difficult and fractious is this issue of around Easter time in 2017, we were dragged into the war room, myself and Jim, and read the Riot Act by the owner of the business, saying, you keep saying that we're not performing, we are performing, we're going to deliver, we guarantee you we're going to deliver these ships in May 18 and July 18. We said, in our professional opinion, bearing in mind that we've been around shipyards for years and years and years, we said there is no chance. And we were effectively dismissed, marched out of the office. So that's absolutely fine. We then fast forward only a couple of months to the 7th of July, when all of a sudden 17.535950 to be exact was handed across the table, which then said that is what you owe us. Our reaction was absolute horror, as you can probably imagine, because up until that point everything was absolutely fine. There was nothing in the change order process that was indicating that they had a problem. All of a sudden it was a major problem. Now, from my perspective, and we obviously have legal advisors, we're professionals in our organisation. We deal with both civil engineering contracts and shipbuilding contracts. At that point in time, effectively, with that quantum of claim, we are in a pre-litigation phase. And when you're in pre-litigation, it's not that you don't talk to one another, but you follow it up with letters. And I believe that was also expressed by the team that was here a couple of weeks ago from Ferguson's giving evidence. I think the quote was, Kevin's quite nice face to face, but we didn't like the way he wrote to us. The way we wrote to them had to be legalistic, because at that point in time, 17.535950 by August had changed to 28.4 million. By the 20th of December 2018, that had changed to 66 million. Now, with all due respect, within the terms of the contract, very simply, there are three mechanisms. There's mediation, there's expert determination, and there's court. In this country, court session. When it gets to that quantum, whether it's 17, whether it's 28, whether it's 66, and 66 only took us until the end of August of 2018, our projection at that stage is by the end of the contract, it could be double that number. Now, we actually turned around and we said to the shipyard, if you believe this, please take us to court. We almost pleaded with them to take us to court. Now, the interesting thing is they've given evidence here verbally, and they've sent you a huge package of documents from a company called HKA, which cost £650,000 to create, probably £650,000 they didn't have. And where did that end up? We said take us to court. Up until the point of administration, we asked and we asked and we asked, if you believe that you have got a valid claim, then please take us to court. They never did. Clyde Blowers, FMEL, are probably one of the most sophisticated companies that there is in Scotland. And they never took us to court. effectively, we rebutted it completely, and I will use these words, that whole claim was a work of fiction. Full stop. We were advised by our own professional feelings, our legal advisors. We went to a very senior QC in Scotland. We even went to people in London to say, have we got it wrong? And the answer was, no, you haven't. There is no claim. And despite asking repeatedly, please take us to court, please take us to court, they never did. Why didn't they? Because they knew that the claim had no validity, either technically or in contractual law. Full stop, end of story.
And Emma, have you further questions?
Yeah, go ahead. No, it's fine.
Because there's a couple of people. Peter Chapman wants to come in, and John Finney, and then I'll come back to you, if I may, if there's further questions.
It's just to follow up in the breakdown of relationships. I mean, we heard it got that bad that CMAL and FML couldn't sit in the same room. Now, you're saying maybe it wasn't quite that bad, but we had heard evidence to that effect. We also heard evidence to the fact that Jim McCall wanted to get ministers involved in trying to help this negotiation procedure carry on. And the minister was told that if he put pressure on the CMAL board to go into negotiations and go into mediation, there was a threat that the whole board was going to resign en masse. Is that correct?
Completely untrue. So we don't know what was said between the owner of Clyde Blowers and a minister. We weren't there. We've got no way of knowing. I'm a board member. Jim's a board member. We have 4 executive board members. We have 4 non-executive board members, including our chairman. That absolutely did not happen. There was never, ever any discussion about mass resignations. And the reason there wasn't is because as a board, we were very, very clear. We cannot be given a direction by Scottish Government to do things which we don't want to do, and, by the way, are illegal. And we are the custodians of public money. How could we turn round, and we've used the word in our submission, ex gratia payments and give gifts? We can't. So very simply, if we're being told professionally by our legal advisors and by a QC and our own knowledge of these contracts that there is nothing due, over my dead body, were we going to give that yard a penny? It would not happen. Not on my watch. Full stop.
So, you were chairman of the board during that period.
No, I'm not the chairman, I'm the chief executive.
Chief executive, sorry, my mistake, chief executive.
Yeah.
During that period, and you categorically say there was no threat of the board to resign?
Absolutely not, never.
And I'm going to leave that there because you've made it clear twice. John, you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, it's about the issue of public money, which we're all concerned with, Mr Hobbs. And indeed, we heard from Mr McCall, who I understand is non-resident in Scotland and himself isn't a taxpayer, but he was very concerned about Scottish taxpayers' money. When you were summoned to the War Office, as you put it, about this room, I think you used the term dragged in. I was trying to play it down a bit. But
Wardroom.
Wardroom, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Mr McCall was there?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And you described the claim as a work of fiction. Mm-hmm. Is Mr McCall the author of that fiction?
There was a professional company brought in by Ferguson's way after that meeting, by the way, so we don't quite know when, but we ended up with the full claim for 66 million, was delivered as a Christmas present on the 20th of December, the day we were all breaking up, and basically that was created by a professional company. That professional company was paid for by Ferguson Marine, so you can make your own judgment.
I mean, I think, John, I'd be quite interested if in your question you could ask about what date this meeting was in the war room or wardroom?
April, just before Easter. It was April 2017.
Or March, maybe March. I'll double check.
If I may, Convener, thanks. I was particularly interested in the role that Mr McCall may have played in the lead-up to that. Was there much direct personal involvement?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay, thank you very much.
Emma, I'm going to bring you back briefly in, and then we're going to move on to Stuart Stevenson.
Just a quick supplementary, really. I mean, like, ministers are the expert shipbuilders, and if you're talking to people, whether it's CMAL, FEMAL, you're engaging and looking at how you conduct business. So the experts are talking to experts, and so having good relationships is key. So how has things been changed to move forward then, so that relationships are strong and maintained and steady, and even so experts are building ships together and ministers are doing what ministers do and shipbuilders do what shipbuilders do?
I think it's fairly clear what's happened. So the business went into administration, it's come out of administration, it's changed its name, Ferguson Marine Port Glasgow. Effectively, it is now owned by Scottish ministers. We're owned by Scottish ministers. CalMac is owned by Scottish ministers through DML. So effectively, we are working extremely closely, you know, to ensure that these ships are delivered. And I mean, I think we need to make it absolutely clear, we did not order these ships speculatively. They were ordered for a reason. And, you know, it's given us, you know, we've burnt the midnight oil, sleepless nights, long hours and a lot of grief, not because we're upset by it. The reason that we are upset by it is that effectively the communities have been let down. There should be 2 ships operating on the high seas now, and we should be building more ships because more ships are required, and that simply hasn't happened. And who does that affect? It probably affects us personally because it's not very nice being under the cosh like this, and, you know, and appearing here. However, that is absolutely irrelevant. The people that it directly affects are the people in those communities, whether they live on the mainland of the island, and it also affects CalMac because CalMac have 2 ships still operating that shouldn't be operating at this point in time. That isn't a safety issue before anybody says it. If there was any safety issue, a ship would not be operating. However, you know, there should be 2 brand spanking new ships, should have been trading for 2 years almost, and they haven't. And that is a huge disappointment to us. You know, we wanted 2 new ships, we contracted 2 new ships. We will be the owner of those ships, we are not the builder, and we have been let down very badly, and everybody in the chain has been let down very badly.
And Kevin, I'm going to start being quite bossy. I try not to be as convener. Well, it's just that we're running short of time, and I want to get the 2. There are other members who want to come in. I want to get the 2 members that have joined the committee in today with some questions as well. So, Emma, thank you for those questions. And sorry to sort of cut it short at the end. Stuart, I think you've got some short questions.
Just a little bit more about the process of trying to mediate, and I'm using that as a generic rather than a legal term. In your submission to the committee at section 9, you talk about the preferred candidate not being immediately available. I'd be interested to know why that was. But more to the point, you go on at the end of 9.1. The process did not continue because Ferguson were unable to express legal reasons for payment to be on unforeseen complexity. Now, we've covered that at some considerable length, so I don't want to reopen that up. But is it the case that mediation didn't proceed because the mediator you wanted wasn't available, or is the ultimate reason that there wasn't a proper basis for mediation? In other words, that really it was something that wasn't for mediation, it was something for the courts?
Well, I think I've answered that previously, but just very, very briefly, mediation, expert determination courts, our view is the quantum was large. We did engage with mediation. There was only one mediator put forward, which was a responsibility of that shipyard, Ferguson's. That person, the person chosen was the only one with any shipbuilding experience, and our professional view is you can't be a mediator on a subject that you know nothing about, and that person was not available. However, when it comes to
go on. The mediation, the person concerned was put forward by the shipyard?
Yes, and we had to agree it.
Right, okay, I think that's all I need to say on that, to be blunt. And the other one is just a tiny little supplement to things that we've covered as well. And that is, I will simplify what's in front of me. Was there any occasion where there was circumstances which could have, under the contract, led to termination of the contract, where you chose not to proceed down that road?
Yes, there was. So there are clauses within the contract where if the ships aren't delivered on time, they can be, effectively, we get to a stage where we can terminate the contract. Our professional view at the time, and hindsight is always a wonderful thing, was that we spoke with the shipyard and we decided that in terms of in terms of timescale for starting all over again with another shipyard, it was better to carry on with this shipyard. So that was...
That's fine. Thank you.
Richard Lyle, followed by Angus.
My question's in reverse. To my mind, we now have the perfect cluster. We have the government, we have CalMac, we have CMAL, we have FML. So basically, Ferguson Marine is now in the ownership of the Scottish Government. How will this impact on the future procurement of new vessels by CMAL? Now we're out of the EU, you're not governed by EU rules. People wanted out of the EU, so let's use the factor that we are out of the EU and use the rules that we can award contracts. So what's the future of Ferguson's?
I'll just park the future of Ferguson's for 1 minute. So the issue of procurement hasn't gone away. We have to stick to procurement rules, and the procurement rules and the laws of Scotland and the UK, which relate to European rules, have not been rescinded. So well,
I'll stop you there.
Yep.
So you're not under WTO rules, you're under EU rules, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So
correct. So we will have to, as it stands today, unless it's otherwise proved, we will have to go out to tender in the same way as we always have done, and we will not discount anybody that wants to bid for our ships in the future. So Ferguson's can bid along with everybody else. That is what the law of the land currently says.
Okay, I just wanted to test you on that one. So 801, 802 represent the first of a number of standard large ferries for Clyde and Hebrides Fleet. I think my colleague Peter Chapman earlier on called them a cruise ship. Should we not now be looking at a new ferry plan to build ferries that suit individual ports or individual runs, rather than building cruise ships?
Well, we don't believe we're building cruise ships for a start. So, that was expressed by other people. So we don't believe we're building cruise ships. Point number one. Point number two, we will in future, where possible, make sure that we are not building identical ships, but when it comes to the way the bridge is laid out and the equipment and the inventory that you need, so the engines, all the rest of it, we will make those as common as possible. Fairly obviously, there is a whole diverse range of routes. If you look at Colin-Trive Rhubuddock, 3 minutes at sea. If you look at Oban to Castle Bay, 5.5 hours. So, these vessels cannot be identical. However, the theme that we're running from this point onwards is we will use as much commonality as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Angus, you've got some questions, and then I'm going to come to Stuart.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be as quick as we can. We know that the new vessels are now late and over budget. Now, you've mentioned the new ferry plan for Isla. So, firstly, has the Isla ferry contract been awarded? And can you tell us what changes you've made to procurement and project management processes to ensure that this situation never happens again?
Jim's running that contract, so over to Jim.
Jim, that might be a very long answer, but I'm going to encourage you not to make it too long.
Our processes are robust. There is no doubt about it that they're robust. We always look to improve as we go along, but we've had success with the hybrid ferries, with the Finlagan, with the Loch Seaforth. My same core team goes back to even the Hebrides and the Clansmen. That's who's part of this team. So we have a good history. Things are robust, but we will always look to make improvements. Always.
Okay, just when you mentioned the Hebrides, I was on it recently, and I'm glad to see it's still going strong, and it's certainly an extremely good ferry, and I look forward to Hebrides Plus coming along. Now, we've discussed the EU just briefly there, but given that we've left or we're leaving the EU, and CMA was created to facilitate competitive tendering as required by EU law, would you agree, and I'd ask you to look at this objectively, that there may be a strong argument to wind up CMAL and go back to the previous setup that existed pre-CMAL?
Well, we fairly obviously wouldn't agree with that. So we have a specialist team based in Port Glasgow. They're experts in their field. We deal with both vessels and shoreside infrastructure and maintenance of shoreside infrastructure. Those people are, have got many, many years of experience, and we are an expert procuring authority. Now, whether it's called CMAL or not, this work needs to be done, for sure. So, you know, if CMAL wasn't there as an example, the work would have to be done by somebody. And, you know, the type of expertise that we have does not grow on trees. We have good people that work long hours, have been under immense pressure. So very simply, our view is that CMAL is fit for purpose and remains fit for purpose. Okay. And we have a very, very dedicated team of people that work extremely hard to produce results. And we do generally produce results. What we're discussing today is a complete anomaly in what we ordinarily do. We are spending tens of millions of pounds per year and broadly on time and on budget. This is not on time and it's not on budget, and we all know that. But this, in CMAL's history since 2006, is the first time we have had this type of problem. And it is a result of the mismanagement of a shipyard, not us mismanaging our business.
Okay. Kevin, I'm going to start saying you've got to look at me now, because I feel an obligation to bring these members in. So, Stuart, you'd like a couple of questions?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just a couple of questions. The first one is regarding the workforce at the yard. Already today, both of you have indicated the history that you've had with the yard, and also vessels that have been built at the yard. Do you have confidence in the workforce?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a skilled workforce, and this workforce, they just need the information to do their job. It's that straightforward. And what I can say, even though a lot of the steelwork was done built at risk, but what we can say, in the main, the quality, when we just talk about steelwork alone, and my steelwork site supervisor will say the same, the quality of the welding and the steelwork is excellent. We can say that. You know, I know there's been a lot of talk about the condition of the ship, how it looks like it's rusting hulks and all that. That's just paintwork. It's coatings. That will be attended to, blast and paint, and it will be, you know, so the boats aren't rusting. So quality of the workforce, fantastic. They just need the right leadership. That's all it needs. Leadership can be done.
Earlier in this inquiry, the committee was told that the way forward would be to actually have a different format in terms of ships, build 4 smaller ships in the Far East and bring them over. If that were to have happened, what would have happened to Ferguson's and the workforce?
I would suspect they would have closed.
I mean, it's pure speculation, isn't it? But I think it is fair to say that, you know, that there wouldn't be a Ferguson's there today. You know, they've got to bid for work, and they can bid for any work that's available worldwide. But will they win it? Won't they win it? We can't really say. But I think it would be very, very difficult to believe that business would survive.
And in your submission, you highlight the issue of the staged payments, and that Ferguson's, that was their request in terms of this. Was that partly because the yard was being rebuilt, or was going to be rebuilt, whilst the vessels were going to be constructed?
Yes, partially. So I think there's 2 parts to this. As I said before, smoothing the cash flow wasn't a problem to us as long as the overall cost didn't change. Jim has mentioned 27 months to build these vessels. There was some recognition within that, so the extra 4 months, they did have an investment plan, and that might take some areas out of operation. So, you know, we were very, very attuned to that.
Okay. And the final question for me? Okay, thank you. Just certainly, in terms, going back to the issue of the workforce, I mean, you've been very complimentary of them. Have you at any time, whether throughout this contract or previous contracts, have you at any time had any concerns about what the workforce have done, and also with the final product that they have put out there?
Well, this is a shipyard with a first-class history, in not just building ferries, but in diverse range of vessels. And that's really how, you know, this country or the UK or even Europe can compete against the Far East, because they are building vessels of this type. They're not just tankers, empty spaces. So this takes great skill, but it takes great leadership as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dean, you've got a couple of questions.
Thank you, Convener. I'll keep this brief. You said that Ferguson Marine was in material breach of its contractual obligations. This, under Scots law, would usually allow you to withhold payments under the contract, regardless of completion certificates. So why, given the contract was clearly broken, why did CMAL continue to make payments under the contract?
By the time the contract was completely broken, we haven't made any payments to that yard for well over a year. So effectively, you know, we haven't been paying them, but that was not the result of you know, any legal position that we wanted to take. They just haven't reached any more milestones, and the reason they didn't reach any more milestones was because the amount of resource applied on those ships was decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. So effectively, we would have expected probably 250, 300 people working on our ships. During the course of 2019, we rarely, between two ships, saw more than 20. And that's just a reality. So we didn't look at it from a legal perspective, but we haven't paid any money because they have reached no more milestones.
Right, but I don't have the exact dates, but concerns over the contract and potential breaches came up very early in the process, and even after those concerns were recognised, payments were still made by CMAL.
Correct.
Why was that? Did you take legal advice in terms of whether you were legally compelled to make those payments?
Yes, we did. We came to the conclusion, our lawyers advised us, that we had to make the payments. That was in the contract, and we didn't want to be in a position where we broke the contract.
You mentioned that you were hoping that Ferguson Marine would take you to court. You mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
If Ferguson Marine were in fundamental breach of contract, why didn't CMAL initiate litigation under the terms of the contract? Were you ever told by Transport Scotland or any ministers not to initiate litigation?
No, we were never given any instructions. And as I said earlier on, in our Articles of Association, we can't be given instructions. So, but the answer is no. We were never told that. I could give you a very long answer, but I know I'm going to get told off. But, you know, he's not listening, so that's good.
Right. You mentioned earlier you've got, obviously,
to bring up parity of 5 each.
It's good when the convener isn't watching. You've got years of experience here. Wouldn't this normally, given a fundamental breach of contract, wouldn't it normally result in litigation, especially if you're still paying under a contract that is fundamentally broken?
No, not under normal circumstances. We have taken a view, and we continue to take a view. There's been mention of scrapping the ships and all of that sort of stuff. We took what we considered was a pragmatic view, that if we were to just basically stop the project and start all over again, instead of having ships delivered as per the Programme Review Board, they would be delivered probably 2 years later than the Programme Review Board has indicated. So at that point in time, you know, again, a lot of soul searching, you know, a lot of late nights, but in reality, we want these ships to be completed, and completing them will be a better process and more timely than starting all over again.
I'm sorry, you'll probably take it out on me later, but you've had the same amount of questions as Stuart, and I think that's fair. So my final question to you, before I thank you for coming here today, we're in a situation where a contract of 97 million is probably, by the calculations we've made this morning, going to cost £250 million to deliver. My question is, as a percentage of blame, you've said that the workforce take no blame because they're excellent, and we saw the standard of the workforce, and you've blamed a lot of it on Ferguson Marine's management. Do you think CMAL have any blame in this at all? A one-word answer is fine.
No.
No. Thank you. And on that note, I would like to thank you both for coming along this morning and giving such detailed evidence. It's been extremely useful to the committee. And I'm now briefly going to suspend the meeting to allow the witnesses to move, and I would ask committee members to stay in place because there is another item of business on the agenda. Thank you.